fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons. Like diamonds, we are back. Going to be talking about summertime lures for catching redfish, speckled trout, snook, flounder, maybe even some mangrove snapper, maybe some Spanish mackerel. I don't know. We'll see what happens here. I know we were talking offline, and Wyatt was like, man, this is the one time it's tough for me to be simplicity specialist. Justin, can we hear it? Simplest.
Let me find my octave. Simplicity specialist.
Oh man, you can trademark that thing, dude.
Oh, good. Goosebumps.
Whereas right. Luke basically said, I just have two lures I use all summer long, depending on the time of day. Because obviously in the summertime, it can get pretty hot in the middle of the day. So you almost have to change it up based on the time of day in the summer and this time of season.
No, not almost. You definitely need to change it up, and particularly if you have a shadow or no shadow. That's kind of the easy way to look at it.
Ooh, so we're going to talk about shadows. All right, so where do we want to begin on this thing? That's beginning in the morning, right? Which is probably one of the better times, in my opinion, especially if you're on vacation on a beach. We've seen a lot of questions in our Insider community. By the way, just hit 25,000 members here recently. A huge shout out and thanks to all of our amazing members who made that happen. Really, really cool. I pinch myself sometimes, Luke. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, we were celebrating 2,500 members, and now we put another 0 behind it, and really, really, really cool. But anyhow, this time of year, a lot of members have been saying, I'm going up to Pensacola or Panama City or over to Fort Walton or over the Fort Myers. Doesn't even matter. It's usually some beach, and they're going on vacation. And like, what should I be doing? And the first thing everyone says is go as early as possible. Because the second it gets hot, 2, you got tons of beach goers, and now you got pressure, and so go as early as possible. But all that being said, we're talking about lures here. What lures are you starting with, guys, in the morning, in the summer? Luke?
Topwater. Yeah, Wyatt's got it too.
You guys both agree here.
Yeah, this is the time. This is the fun topwater time. It's all when you don't have a shadow, right? When that sun's not up high enough to cast a shadow, topwater is awesome. It's a good way to cover ground fast, and actually has a better average fish size in most cases, especially if you're using single line hooks. It'll weed out the little small fish you don't want to catch, and you'll catch the big ones. So yeah, topwater, I think that's really every single morning I've been going out, start with topwater.
And you got you and Wyatt both had a moonwalker?
You know this.
Ooh, I heard a little rattle there.
Mine's tied on the rod. So always out of the 3 rods I bring out there in the summertime, topwater early morning, and early, sometimes even when it's dark, like when that sun's not even coming up yet, it could be 5:36 in the morning is that perfect time. Potentially some of your biggest snook will be now. This time of the year and heading into fall, getting on a topwater bite. So always have that tied on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and for anybody wondering why you would, want to throw topwater in the morning, just throughout summertime, you've got really hot temperatures. Overnight, it's going to cool off to be the best time of day for fish to feed. That's why we say get out early. The heat really causes those fish to have a little bit slower feeding during the middle of the day. First thing in the morning, you know, even before that sun comes up, you start to get more light. They start feeding, and the rattle and the walk from a moonwalker. Topwaters are great, but the moonwalker frequency and the cuts that are on that nose. I love the design of this. It's like a mix between that skidder V, but it's also got a really nice heavy rattle in there. So it does a good job bringing up those trout that are keyed in on noise. I mean, it's like, I love topwater fishing, and early summer is like the best time for it. So I would say that there's nothing that beats topwater first thing in the morning, right before that sun's coming up. And, you know, probably, I think the rule is you've got your hand on the horizon once that sun comes up over. And I've had to go up into noon where you can still get topwater bites. But typically once that sun gets up above my hand, I start switching my presentations up. But topwater is unbeatable during that time frame, I think.
All right, what's this whole hand thing again? Sure.
So
assume someone's not watching this and try to explain.
Yeah, I thought he lost his thumb. I was like, what?
I thought he was doing like puppet stuff in the.
No. So the rule is, and this is just a thing that I've heard. There's no textbook truths to fishing, as we all know. But if you're looking for a general guideline of when to throw topwater, in the mornings and evenings, when you put the bottom of your hand on the horizon, so you've got your water line, put your bottom of your hand on the horizon, when the sun is still covered by your hand, and I guess you get a little leeway here, thumb or no thumb, if the sun is covered by your hand, you can still be throwing topwater. The moment that, again, you've got your hand on the horizon, the sun rises above your hand or your thumb, if you just like throwing topwater, you get a little bit more time there. That's when you would stop throwing topwater. But I've caught fish during the middle of the day on topwater. Again, there's no textbook truths with fishing, but if you're looking for general guidelines, I definitely would say that those early morning time frames, just first, hour or two during that sunrise and the hour before the sun has risen, is prime time for topwater. It's tough to beat that, but you can definitely see it start to slow down. You still might be able to get bites, but it's just harder for those fish to feed. You think about the sun coming through the surface of the water, especially for predators like trout that have sensitive eyesight. They feed mostly with their eyes. It's hard for them to look straight up into the sun and try to feed. I mean, imagine going to a grocery store out where there's no ceilings and you're having to look straight up into the sun for glass ceilings. It'd be hard to reach up and grab your food. So that's why I use that kind of hand rule of thumb, or rule of hand, I guess. So yeah, that's basically what that is.
Yeah, I would definitely never shop at that store. But it's true. I mean, I think so many people forget that, fish have eyes and they don't have eyelashes and lids and polarized glasses and everything that we have, and they don't like looking directly up into it. Talk to why we're still talking about morning and topwater. I think a lot of people in general, like, you see that when it's just glass, you're like, oh, and it is a cool time if you can get an explosion there. But I know, I'm guessing, Luke, your answer might be different. You don't want it to be completely flat. You want a little wind, you want a little ripple. As cool as it is to see something explode on topwater, when there's not even an ounce of movement in the water, it can sometimes be a little bit tougher. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would 100% agree. With topwater, it's funny. I will switch up how fast my retrieve is, how wide I'll whip my wrist for a walk, depending on the surface of the water, what that texture is, I like to call it. If it's glass calm, I am doing very, very subtle walks, because if you have too loud of a presentation, and again, you listen to this moonwalker, there's a pretty solid rattle in there. Even just doing a very tiny head turn is going to engage that rattle and engage that lure to cut and make a splash. When you've got a little bit more windy conditions, you've got a much more, I guess, abrasive texture on the surface of the water. And you have to make that lure, again, my goal when I'm working my topwater is to have it be subtle but noticed. I don't want it to be in the face of those fish. The only time I would say that might be a necessary presentation is if you've got a school of redfish that are just smashing bait. I have had some scenarios out here in Texas where you've got these giant schools of mullet where they're 100, 200 thick, and you're walking that really hard through the middle of the school to get the attention of these reds. But that's not always the case. If you're just working shorelines, which is probably 70 to 80% of, when I'm fishing topwater, I'm not fishing directly in a school of bait. So I'm just doing a subtle presentation, just enough of a walk on a little bit of a ripple. I would say my favorite topwater conditions are when there's just a little bit of chop, not too much. I actually prefer wind to glass calm, but like you said, there's nothing more picturesque than having a glass calm morning and seeing something, surge up on that bait. It makes for a much more nice thing to watch, but it's not always conducive to the best topwater fishing, I would say. But that's just what I've experienced. I don't know if Luke maybe has a different answer. I know me and him are going to be going head to head on this summer lure podcast today. What do you think, Luke? Calm conditions?
Straight calm is the worst. Like it's the fun time to be out there. Like I used to always, oh man, I hope we have good calm weather because I want to go fishing and have fun on the water. It's great to have fun on the water, but as far as catching fish, it's actually really tough. It gives them a lot of advantages where everything's really calm, especially trout and snook that can just feel everything. They have very good feel. It's tough. And so I like to have at least 5-10 mile an hour winds actually, like in doing tournaments, I would hope for like 20. I would hope for it to be super windy if I'm ever fishing a tournament. There's less people on the water, but most important, those bigger fish, there's just so much commotion that they have a much harder time knowing that danger's in the area. And on topwater too, this is like for a lot of people we chat with, I've never caught a fish on topwater. I've always wanted to. I just don't think they work. The biggest thing is getting out there early. And as we've been talking about, like getting out there early is earlier the better. And if you don't want to be doing puppets to the sky, you can just look and see if you have a shadow or not. Like if you have a clear defined shadow, that means the sun's up and that the fish are probably not going to be feeding all that aggressively on topwater. But if it's before the sun's rising, obviously you'll have no shadow at all, and that's prime time. Blast topwater, cover as much ground as you possibly can, and you can have some really good shots at success. And the calm water still can work, but this is why I said you almost have to go slow and not very aggressive. My favorite is a nice wind chop, like a good 10-mile-an-hour wind chop that's going onto a point. Oh man, that's the best. That's when it's like big trophy fish time. Having a good topwater plug and some windy, kind of wind-driven waves. That's the ultimate.
Justin, what do you think? Oh, I'm sorry. Why?
No, I was going to let Justin. I'll have another little tidbit after because I'm interested to see what Justin has to say on his topwater fishing conditions.
So the summer and fall are my favorite times to fish and to throw topwater. But right now we're focusing on, early morning, like those beautiful scenic situations that we all dream about going on the water and having this window of opportunity to throw a topwater. And we're forgetting about the curveball, and that's storms or cloud cover. So we have crazy barometric pressure changes with, summer afternoon showers, especially down here in the Southeast. And the pressure could go up, and then a big rainstorm comes, and then that pressure drops immediately. And you have this window, could be an hour or two or longer, right after a summer storm passes. And it's usually glassed out or a little bit of wind chop. All that cool rain cools down the water temperature as well. And fish will eat a pickle on the surface running full speed. Like they get so fired up and excited that's my favorite time to throw topwater. That morning window is fantastic, but when you get a little bit of rainstorm coming through or just heavy winds and it cools off the surface temperature of the water, fish get really, really fired up. And even in those glass calm conditions, if it's cloudy, you don't have the puppet hand tool to use it to see the sun. It could be 1:30 in the afternoon, but if it's cloudy, the fish are fired up and they'll happily take a topwater. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, no shadow. And two, before I forget, but the summertime, especially for those of us fishing in areas with a lot of grass, as the heat of the day comes, the grass will float up to the surface, and it can be a nightmare for topwater lures. That's why the morning times often has advantage, but after a good rain, that grass will a lot of times go down, and that's why it's holding up. That's why single inline hooks are a game changer for those of us in areas like Tampa Bay, even over in Texas, a lot of grassy areas. The single line hooks, there's way less chance of a weed catching a single hook than a treble hook, right? It's 1/3 to be exact. And so you just have way less issues with weeds. Obviously, it's still not going to be totally weedless, which there, like that bullfrog lure is actually pretty legit. But if there's just a moderate amount of weeds, it's really hard to beat an actual plug. And the cool thing about the Moonwalker is that it actually comes with the inline hooks, just because it's so important. But if you don't use this, right, you can buy those inline hooks at a tackle store. Our tackle store has some. You get them at a ton of stores. Just can't emphasize enough the importance of that. It's better for you too, right? Less risk of getting hooked, and better for the fish if you're doing catch and release fishing.
And our tackle store, by the way, is fishstrong.com, and that Moonwalker is one of our custom lures there at fishstrong.com, and only for insider members, at least for right now. It's going to thank you for being a member. And of course, our members get 20% off everything in the store. This episode sponsored by fishstrong.com. All right, so let's move on. Wyatt's hand thing is now past his thumb. He can actually see the sun and the horizon. Luke sees his shadow. What are we doing now? What are we moving from? Obviously moving from a topwater to slam shady baby.
Yeah, so subsurface, given the weed issue, a weedless subsurface has a big advantage. So for that reason, Slam Shade 2.0 or a bomber, if the bait's bigger, right? Put it on a twist lock.
Hey, hold up. The bomber kind of looks like a pickle there, like Justin's comment there. It looked like, hey, there was a pickle.
Fish leader, right for storm, fish leader. But yeah, so just a weedless soft plastic is really hard to beat. It's a tough time to throw like myridines and stuff like that, because especially if you have troubles, now you have something subsurface and it's going to catch all the grass out there. So like the fact that the daytime this grass is coming up to the surface, it like almost has to be weedless in some days. Weedless smooths actually work great too. I don't know if I didn't bring one on hand. And just like always, it's all about matching your depth, right? Have some weighted hooks for the shallows, have some jig heads for the deeper stuff. But like literally for my game plan is this no shadow has literally been like what I basically use this season for most cases. Always throw some power prawns and leprechauns in there, but most of the stuff can be just on those bait imitations.
I got a question real quick on all of the little lures you had in your hand. Do you like to spray Dr. Juice even on your top waters?
Yeah, I have been.
You have?
After seeing what happened at that Snook light, now 2 times, like I put on everything. It's why not, right? It takes 2 seconds, and I've never been a believer in scent until I saw the Snook not interested at all, and then totally interested, and then another trip down in that area, same thing. Dr. Juice on a power prawn while I was catching a bunch of Snook. Somebody else on the dock asked for it. I gave him the power prawn. He put Procure on it. Still wasn't catching anything for like 45 minutes. And power prawn was out fishing people using live bait too. And then as soon as he's like, okay, let me try that scent. I put some Dr. Juice on there. He literally started catching Snook like a minute later. Like it was, I've never really been that much of a believer in it, but like I'm really becoming a fanboy of this stuff. It's working. So
and we will have the 4 ounce, because that's the great one, because it's the spray bottle one. It's so easy, and there's a ton of it. And we finally have them come in like in the next 7 days, I've heard, from when this thing goes live. So check fishstrong.com. Make sure to get on the list. There's a notifications list, because they will go fast. I know we've got like last time we had 1,000, they were gone in 24 hours. So I know we got at least another 1,000 coming in here in the next 7 days. So go to fishstrong.com, get on that notifications list for Dr. Juice. The juice is loose.
Have you guys used it for topwater? I haven't done a defined test on topwater, so I can't say like, oh, you have to. Like, have you guys dabbled with it yet?
Justin sprays it on his hamburgers.
Yeah, so I've not really ever been a fan of putting scents on hard baits. I've not tried the juice, because the juice is a little bit different than like stuff I've used such as Procure. But what I definitely do with the Dr. Juice is put it on my leader. So I put it on my top water, like leaders, while I'm fishing top water. And I do find that, again, we're fishing low light conditions. Any factors that are outside of the visual presentation of your lure, definitely I find help out. So adding the extra scent on the leader, I do believe helps. And it really does make a difference, I think. And as we could kind of transition towards the subsurface tactics that we're getting into now, you've still got the scent on that leader. So as much as I would say, you can put it on your top water, it works just as well on the leader. And then when you start kind of chopping knots, putting new lures on, you still have that scent built in there. That Dr. Juice stays for a very long time. So that's what I've been doing. Just put it on my leader.
That's risky, dude. I mean, now all of a sudden you got all these fish biting your leader. I mean, Dr. Juice attracts everything.
Yeah. No,
they don't have a bunch of teeth.
Justin, what about you, man?
I'm gonna try it. When you use the Dr. Juice, it does leave like a sheen, or it's obvious that the oil in the solution that's in Dr. Juice kind of mixes with the water in a weird way. You can kind of see it once it hits the water. The whole point is, every time I use Dr. Juice, I think about that video I made where I'm talking about it's like smelling McDonald's fries. Like you even if you're not hungry, you're gonna want McDonald's fries kind of deal. So I'm trying to relate it to everything, so it makes sense. I don't know if you guys eat McDonald's. Everybody eats McDonald's fries, but the smell is, it has pheromones. It's things that force or trigger an animal to attack or eat something that's a chemical response. So you're creating a trail of a bait fish that's moving away. It's picking up on that trail. In theory, it makes sense. Whether you use it in a soft plastic or on a hard bait, it's still going to stay on the hard bait. It's still going to create that trail. It's going to guide fish straight to the lure as well. So you've got the audible, you've got the visual, and now you've got a scent aspect involved in it. So normally I wouldn't use scent. Like I've tried Procure on topwaters in the past, but it doesn't leave the same type of trail that Dr. Juice does. So that's going to be my next thing too. Look, I'm going to start trying it out and see if it takes it to a whole new level.
I'll tell you whose fries have gone downhill is Wendy's. You guys been to a Wendy's in a while? I did it on a road trip and had to stop at a Wendy's, and I was just disappointed. I mean, I'm a Chick-fil-A guy first and foremost, then maybe McDonald's. Went to Wendy's, and it's happened twice now. Like, we'll give them one more chance. I won't go back to Wendy's. When Dave or whoever's running the company now, Wendy herself, I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you had the same experience, or do you avoid Wendy's?
I think the fries are soggy because everybody's crying on them because they're sad. That's my experience. I hear you. It's like you don't come back from it easy.
Yeah. Now that I live in Texas, the only fast food chain that I could go to that starts with a W is Whataburger, and their fries are absolutely fire. So I have no complaints there, but I haven't been to Wendy's in a long time.
I do. Yeah. Whataburger is excellent. And heck, even just going to the old HEB in Texas, some of those monster HEBs. I mean, you could dine there for a month straight and never get tired of it. So,
yeah. Speaking of dining, I want to elaborate on my summer subsurface presentations. I know Luke kind of went through a simplicity specialist type deal with just a few. The tip I was going to talk about earlier was kind of gauging the activity levels and the trends of fish while I'm using my topwater presentation. That's generally going to be how I choose my subsurface lures for the day. So, you're throwing your topwaters, and especially during the early morning hours in summertime, that's when you're going to get most of your data for the day. That's when you're going to find out what those fish are doing, because you're going to get the most strikes, because that's when fish are most aggressive. So I can find out, what depth these fish are holding. We know, typically in the mornings, they're going to be a bit shallower. The best hunting opportunities for game fish are a bit shallower in the mornings, and they're willing to slide up there because it's cooler. So I know that they're going to move out a bit, but I can get a general depth range. I know they're not going to move out too far. It's going to be, a consistent 10, 15 feet out from where they were holding on a shoreline. And that may be just a change in depth of 1 or 2 feet. But I know that they're going to be at a general depth range. And I'll find that with the top waters. But I'm also gauging their activity levels in terms of how much energy they have when they're going after the top waters. And as you continue to fish subsurface lures, as you continue to fish surface lures, you'll see, them surging on it 5 feet away. And then you'll see ones that are just kind of popping on it, low energy. You'll know how active those fish are. If they're absolutely freight training your moonwalker, you know that you can kind of maybe get away with some faster rolling of paddle tails, which is going to allow you to cover more ground. Or if you need to really slow your presentations down. And as I said, as we progress into the later parts of the day, those fish have less energy. The heat's kind of getting to them. These fish are cold-blooded, so they're going to be affected by the external temperature. It's going to slow down how active they are. So if I see that those fish are active in the morning, I know that energy level is going to taper down a little bit less than it would if it's a hot day in the morning, and I see that they're not as active on the topwater lures. So if I know that they're hammering my topwater, I'm probably going to go with a paddle tail, but my retrieve is just going to be a constant with a couple pauses mixed in. And I like the bomber if I'm fishing around, again, those big schools of mullet. If I see there's a lot of pinfish, glass minnows, smaller bait fish profiles, I'm going to go with the 2.0. I don't have one in front of me because the only pack I have is out in my boat. I need to order some more. But these bombers are great. Yeah, Luke's got one right in front of me. And I'm always using, again, I'm fishing mostly grass flats here. If I was in the Carolinas, maybe it would be jig heads in some of those muddy creeks. But I would say, again, because of the floating grass, owner twist locks, 1/8 ounce is my go-to. I'm fishing in 1 to 2 feet of water for the reds. And then for trout, I'm slightly off that flat, usually on the edge in 3 to 4 feet. I might just switch to a 3/16 owner twist lock. But again, it's just going to be really kind of covering ground with constant retrieves, 4 count constant, and then maybe 1-2 count pause. That's going to allow that lure to drop. And usually that's what triggers the strike. Now, if I see that those fish aren't as active on the top waters, I've got a couple different opportunities in terms of finesse presentations. And this is where I start diverging away from simplicity specialists. It turns more into twitch, pause, retrieve. So my options are now Alabama leprechauns, and I'm going to save these for the days where it's, again, we've got glass calm conditions, and that's, we talked about, it's not necessarily the best conditions for fishing, and the leprechaun is great for invoking those strikes while being, again, subtle, but noticeable. So it's got good flash to it. If I'm fishing for reds, this is a go-to lure here, but it really works for trout as well. If you've got, I would say, clear and calm enough water, again, those fish usually are holding deeper and in faster current, so it gets a little bit dicey. I will sometimes go to a paddle tail, so I've got more vibration in that current. But sometimes if it's clear enough, you can get away with just the visual presentation of the bait. But if you need the vibration, twitching paddle tails works really well. And then lastly, I'm always going to have a shrimp imitation in the summertime. It's a really great profile to have, especially if that's what I'm seeing. For the reds, power prawns work really well. But I've really been liking this Z-Man Easy shrimp in the Slam Shady color for the trout.
Oh, Slam Shady, baby.
Yeah, because that Z-Man material, that Elastec, it's number one, really tough. So toothy trout don't tear it up really easily, but it's more buoyant. So it does a really good job of sinking really slow. And we talk about how these fish are lethargic. We know that trout key in on vertical changes in baits rather than just something darting across really quickly. They're ambush predators that come up from below. Their mouth hinges upward. We can just tell by their anatomy that, and watching a lot of Luke's underwater footage, that when lures start to drop, that's usually what keys a strike in from trout. So I've liked this easy shrimp because if I find that trout are keyed in on shrimp profiles, I can just put, a Texas eye, 1/8 ounce, and twitch it along the edges of those flats right above those potholes. And it sinks real nice and slow. It's weighted really, really well. And this is just a killer presentation for those trout. But again, if I'm up in the shallows and I'm just bouncing for reds, it's tough to beat that Power Prawn Junior on one of those 1/8 ounce jig heads as well. So I know that's a lot of tackle to cover, but there's just so many different things that can happen in summer in terms of the energy levels of fish, where they're going to be holding. And that plays into so many different presentations with all the different tackle that we have. That's, the best way to attack these fish. But most times I'm going to use that top water in the mornings to determine what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. I know that was a really long explanation, but I felt like I had to cover that.
That's good. And Justin, I know you use the Slam Shady 2.0 in a little bit different way in terms of taking the tail off, making it a little bit smaller.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that finger roll. Let's say 10 o'clock onward on a normal summer day where we've got sunny skies, relatively calm conditions. I'm sight fishing whenever possible. That's 10
a.m. 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Oh, like dumb and dumber. This whole time I thought she was just a raging alcoholic. What kind of person has to meet you at the bar at 10 a.m.?
Surprise.
Dumb and Dumber quote for anybody who, for the
when the sun starts getting higher, it makes sight fishing a little bit easier because you can see everything, right? But a lot of these fish get really picky, especially in the summertime. Those water temps start to come up a little bit. And when I'm sight fishing for redfish, I have a lot of opportunities at seeing fish, reds, trout, and snook on the grass flats, underneath mangroves, what have you. But my opportunities to get those bites are limited. So I've had to downsize and go more finesse in my approach. And I actually was kind of late to the game in using paddle tails for many, many years. I mean, for a long time, everybody was like, all you need is a paddle tail to go out and fish. And I hadn't caught a lot of fish on paddle tails because I was, liking little stick baits. I would take a paddle tail, I would chop the tail off, and I would just use that little stick and bounce that in front of fish, because that is a really small finesse presentation. It doesn't really give off any vibration at all. And this profile, this on the Slam Shady 2.0 with the tail chopped off, and I'm going to have to show it right now. The gold digger, man, I am so excited for these, man. Yes. Like clear situations, the pickiest redfish out there. and I'm got a pair of scissors in front of me. Watch out!
Oh,
Cut the tail off.
you just did that.
I did. This is going to be set up on an owner twist lock, 16th ounce, about as finesse as possible, and I'm going to slay redfish this summer on this lure. So we've talked about it before. For color, a light and a dark. We wanted to cover the whole spectrum. So whether you're going to use a slam shady, I think visually, when you're sight fishing and you can see these redfish, or you can see your lure a little bit easier with the slam shady, so you can present it better. But if I'm just really in tune and I want to go even more finesse, I think that gold member is going to be the ticket. But I will intentionally cut the tail off of it and just bounce it in the grass or through a pothole and keep it really, really finesse. That's going to be my focus. Is these fish 10 o'clock and onward, they've probably already had a meal. They might not be very hungry, but from impulse, if you present it properly, this is an easy meal. I do like using the power prawn. I will still use the power prawn in heavy grass situations, especially if fish are tailing, and I know that they're keyed in on a crustacean in the grass. But as you can see, size-wise, a Slam Shady 2.0 with the tail cut off is a little bit smaller than the Power Prawn Junior. So if I want to really downsize, that's about as small as I'm going to go. And I think a fish would be hard-pressed to not eat that. I mean, that's of no threat at all. That's a single French fry, single McDonald's French fry.
None of that Wendy's stuff.
This would be a Chick-fil-A waffle fry.
And then Dr. Juice is just like the ketchup or the honey mustard sauce.
Exactly.
Depending on what you're into. That's good. Super helpful. Luke, do you use anything else? I mean, I know I've seen, especially at docks, let's talk about that. And some of the super hot days that fish do move, right? They want to find it's never a perfect temperature. Someone says, hey, what temperatures have to be? But talk about that. Talk about temperatures and the relative temperatures and where fish in general are kind of moving throughout a summer day. Just a general, not like hurricane or pre-hurricane, not some crazy rainstorm, but just in general, a normal sunny summer day.
Yeah, so I mean, dock fishing is always good. It's something that's good all year round. Summertime is when dock fishing is at its best, because after you're doing your little sun puppet with the sky, or after you see your shadow, the water's starting to get hot, and fish don't like to be too hot. And Jay, like when we went filming with Peter Deeks up over in the Indian River, it was in the middle of summer. We had it was just too hot to film, so we kind of took a break and hey, let's go fishing. And the bite was really tough, so we started fishing docks. And what those fish were doing, 100%, we actually had a great day. 100% of our strikes was up in the shadows of the docks. And if you've ever been like swimming under docks as a kid or whatever, or under bridges, lobster diving, there's a temperature shift as you go from the sunny water to the shade. Even though even a dock, even at the long stretch of the dock, which is only like 4 feet wide or 5 feet wide or whatever, it doesn't have to be like a huge 2,000 square foot dock. Just like any sort of continuous shade is going to be an actual line of cooler water, so those fish will naturally gravitate there. So for that reason, I do a lot of dock fishing in the summer, and I'll actually have a dock fishing mini course coming out to Insider Club members. But for the lures for that, it's really about jigs. As both White and Justin were talking about, basically in the middle of the day, the fish are going to be lethargic. They're not going to be super comfortable. They've probably already eaten something. So if you're not getting a nice, easy to eat meal right in their face, they probably won't eat it. And so it's really about just getting a good looking lure right in their face, and they're going to be on the bottom. So we pretty much have to have a lure that gets down to the bottom, that looks good, and that has some good motion. And so for that reason, like a tailless paddle tails still work. And if the water's clear, the non-paddle tails do better. But if the water's real murky, then you actually do need the paddle tail just to have a little bit more vibration. So generally, the power prawn has been like my most trusted for dock fishing. That's the shrimp lure we have, whether this is the big size, or we also have a junior. Kind of try both and see what they go after. They both work. And the average fish size will be bigger on the bigger shrimp. But just getting, a good looking lure, and most importantly, you have to have a good cast, get it up there in the shade, and just bounce it along the bottom. Bounce it slowly, not too fast, keep it on the bottom. The further away from the bottom you are, the less strikes you're going to get. And the further away from the shade you are, the less strikes you're going to get. So I would say that would be a quick little 1 or 2 lures to have. Get some jig heads, get either power prawns or slam shadies or something like it, right? Don't get those lures, and just get it there in the strike zone, and you can have a really good time even in the heat of the day. Because yeah, Joe, when we were out there, it was so hot that we had to, like, one of the redfish, even though we revived it pretty well, was like barely swimming off. We had to recatch it, and we spent like 5 minutes reviving that thing and then finally swim off. It was so hot there was barely any oxygen in the water. So
yep. And the final thing is to make sure you got some Dr. Juice saltwater slam scent. Yeah. It does help. I mean, Luke was like the most skeptical just of scents in general, and it just continues to flat out work. But also loose.
Also too, I mean, gulp shrimp are great as well. Like, that's what we were using that day in particular. That was before we even touched the Dr. Juice. And so before I would only use gulp in that scent, because that gulp scent is great too. Something, I don't know what they have in there, but it'll help draw strikes. So something that nice and smelly, the better, I guess, the more realistic it looks, the better. And just got to get it right in their face.
In the face. All right. What else before we wrap up? Any other summertime tips? I mean, we've, for the most part, kept it pretty simple. I mean, 5 or so different lures. Everyone agrees, start in the morning with topwater. Everyone kind of said some form of a slam shade, like some paddle tail. Wyatt, you mentioned Alabama leprechaun, some kind of jerk shad. If you know, it's a very clear and not so windy day, and you want something a little bit less noisy and loud. We got power prawns for fishing some of the docks and some of the deeper areas when the fish go down a little bit deeper and you want something a little bit heavier popping off the bottom. What else? Any other must-have summer lures?
I want to give 2. Well, I wouldn't necessarily. One will be a lure, and the other will be a tactic. Just to give a tip on both redfish and trout. Just a summer-specific tactic for redfish. Again, we talk about getting out early morning. I find that when that sun does come up and you do start looking for those fish after, y'all make fun of my shadow puppet, but I promise I'm going to be seeing one of those live podcasts. You and Luke are going to be out there, both of y'all doing the robot with your hands. So I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that. But
Luke, look, I made a sailboat.
Well, okay. So as we start transitioning to subsurface presentations, I will say one thing I always see with reds is they're going to find those shorelines that have the shade for the longest amount of time. So even as that sun comes up, if you're fishing mangrove islands, you're fishing creeks, find the side that the sun is opposite of. So if the sun is rising on your left shoulder and you've got a mangrove island straight in front of you, fish the right side of that island, because what's going to happen is that right side is going to have more shade. The DO2 is going to hang there longer. We talked about how dissolved oxygen dissipates as the water temperature rises. So that water stays a little bit cooler, more comfortable for those fish. And again, hunting opportunities are more prime for these redfish in shallower water. So they're going to hang there a little bit longer. So if you can, as you start transitioning to the subsurface presentations, find those shorelines that have shade for a little bit longer, the opposite side of where the sun is going to be rising from. I find that, even as you're working topwaters, redfish will hang in those areas. So just know where the sun's going to rise in relation to where you're going to be fishing. Again, we talk about pre-planning, knowing where the fish are going to be feeding before you even get out on the flats. This is spots mastery, the first couple modules. Really important you guys go through that course. If you're not a Salt Strung Insider, you're missing out. That's just one of the many tips that's in there. But I will also give a tip for trout, and that is be out there fishing at night for them. And we were talking about a lure for summer fishing. One thing I found is a dark topwater. I know this is a funny looking color scheme. I know Joe just like shot back the chartreuse in black. It looks really weird. The chartreuse head is not for the trout. It's for the angler to be able to see it. But fishing dark, loud topwaters at night, this skitter walk doesn't necessarily have the best walk when the sun comes up. I'm not fishing this thing at all. But if I'm fishing at night or before the sun is up, I'm going to be fishing a really dark topwater. Reason for that is it creates a little bit more contrast. And we know that with trout, they are visual predators and their eyes are really good at seeing in low light. In fact, there's a lot of studies that have been done on trout. They do a lot of heavy feeding at night. FWC has a whole study on this. You can go to the site and look at it. But this is why we talked about, we don't see a lot of trout being caught during the middle of the day in the clear summertime, because it's really bright. Their eyes are extremely sensitive, but they feed really heavily at night and during these twilight periods. But I catch a lot of trout on topwater at night. You can go out 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night and catch a lot of trout wading shorelines, edges of flats, things like that, where these fish do want to go slide up shallow and get really good feeding opportunities. But the topwater, there's something about that splash and that vibration that really helps fish zero in on an easy meal. So I would say, get yourself one of those really dark topwaters for nighttime. Again, I'm still going to stick with the moonwalker. The moment the sun comes up, I do need that bone color. And I do believe that, we look at these body types. This is going to walk better. We know the Super Spook Junior walks better than the Skitter walk. There is a slightly larger rattle in here, but again, that plays more into a nighttime presentation. There's a good rattle in here for when the sun comes up, so you get a good walk. You also get the good frequency. So again, middle of the night, as soon as that sun comes up. That's an easy way to kind of think about when you're going to want to use each. But and make sure you're sticking close to those shaded shorelines for those redfish. So that's my redfish and trout tip there that I wanted to share. Just two things that I do in the summer that I believe aren't talked about a whole lot.
That's a great tip. And what's your favorite sunscreen? Why?
That's low blow there, Joe. I look like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer right now. I get that Neutrogena. There is a really good post that we did, you did, on the safest sunscreen. So I stopped buying that Great Value crap, and I switched to the Neutrogena because I don't need any more damage done to my skin, as you can see.
All right. Well, I'll do a follow-up video on how to apply it. And this is not just for Wyatt, for his parents too. I made a promise to your dad that I would continue to hammer on you just like my parents did until I see you putting a lot of sunscreen on.
I'm working on it.
I gotta
topwater fishing and making shadow puppets.
Just stop, Wyatt. You're already like dug the hole, man. You're good. So we talked about topwater, talked about Slam Shake 2.0 no tail. Mm-hmm. Talked about bomber. Kind of to add on to the bomber conversation, I like experimenting, and I have weird rigs. My tackle box is full of some weird things that I save for unique occasions, like adding underspins or adding Slam Shady, 4-inch diesel minnow to a chatterbait. I mean, I like tweaking and doing different stuff. I have not spent a lot of time with the Texas Eye, but I'm excited to use either the 4-inch or the 5-inch Paddler Z on a heavier Texas Eye. This is a 1/4 ounce and the 5-inch Paddler Z for bigger trout, bigger snook, bigger reds. Really later on in the day, topwaters are great search tools. Bombers are great search tools as well. And I think I do have a bomber rigged with a Texas Eye. The plastic makes it a little bit tougher. You can do it with an under twist lock as well, like a 3/16 ounce, and it would get the job done. Really going to try both side by side and see. But there's a little more undulation in the tail of the Paddler Z by Z-Man. Doesn't put off as much vibration, but it's got a little more, I guess, left and right action. I kind of view this as a slow, sluggish bait. In the fall months, you can hike it up a little bit, get it right underneath the surface, and this is an awesome lure for big bull redfish. We're kind of getting into the early spawning time of the year. It goes full swing come like September and October, but into July, early August, the bigger redfish and bigger trout will slowly start to move up real shallow, and they might be sitting in potholes, or they might be moving in 1s or 2s. And I like slowly creeping Paddler Z through the grass or as close to the bottom as possible. Really no crazy erratic action, just almost like I'm dragging it through the grass. And I just view it as a really weak or injured pinfish or finger mullet. Looks like an easy opportunity, and kind of do an opposite. You've got low calorie, low risk. You've got high calorie, but if it's injured and moving really slow and it's opportunistic, I think that a bigger fish will slurp this up. I tend to go with bombers and these 5-inch or 4-inch Paddler Z for bigger trout. year round, but I'm really excited to do this guy later on in the day as just a search bait alternative. So that's what I'm excited about.
Good
Excellent.
deal. Yeah, I'll throw one extra lure tip, and so we've hit topwater hard because it's just a lot of fun, and particularly again in that low light conditions, it's great. But no matter how fired up they are, they're gonna be missing. And if you're using treble hooks, fish are incredibly good about hitting topwaters and not getting hooked. In many cases, from the underwater footage, just watching the trout on slow motion hitting paddle tails, they'll actually their front of this is the top of their head, their nose will actually hit the tail up and curve the bait into their mouths. And I think they're trying to do that with topwaters as well. With the soft plastic, it's cool. The lure just curves right in. And if you get strikes, right, we get so many strikes where we miss the strike and the soft plastic curved around and the hook sets into the soft plastic. That's because that fish basically is trying to suck in and turn that fish headways down. So when they try that with the hard bait, it knocks the bait out of the water. We've seen if you use topwater plugs, you've certainly had your plug knocked out of the water, and it's because their top of the nose is hitting it, popping it totally out of view. So when that happens, very important if you're going out for max fish catching is to have a subsurface ready for when that fish has identified itself as hungry, right? It's shown itself, you know exactly where it is. It missed the topwater, throw a subsurface in there. And so a good subsurface for, right, if they just missed the plug, throw a lure that's similar size, but actually goes underwater. I always have this handy. And if you take somebody new out fishing, even take you throw the topwater, take the hooks out, and then let the fish find themselves, and then yank it out, do a Bill Dance hook set, get it totally out of their way, and then have the other person cast the lure. If they're within 5 feet, they'll usually get the strike. And so that's just a good tip for topwater is having. And if you want to catch more fish than your buddy, and it's one of those days where the fish keep hitting topwater but missing, let them keep throwing topwater, and you throw one of these things, and you can swipe their fish. But yeah, just very important is to be ready for subsurface when the topwater bite. On one of those days where they're just missing, the subsurface will finish the deal.
So when they're not eating the 8-piece chicken nuggets, you throw out that French fry. That's good. That's a good tip. And Wyatt, excellent tips as well. Justin nailed it. That was a good one. I thought that was very helpful. And the best news is everything we just talked about here can be found at fishstrong.com. We're out there with our own hard-earned money, buying this stuff, putting it to the test, and then coming back to you kind of like, well, what is it? The Consumer Reports, right? But they go out there and completely unbiased and say, here's the best, here's the worst, and here's why. And so that's really what we do. We go out there and test a lot of stuff. And sometimes we'll go create our own things if we can't find it out there, if we want to improve upon something else that already exists. And then we give all of our members 20% off, sometimes more, but at a minimum 20% off pretty much everything in the store. And like I said, 25,000 members strong. And we got people all over the place and in all different skill levels. You know, I've seen comments before on Facebook and YouTube. Oh, that's for people who don't know what they're doing. Baloney. I mean, we have tons of like full-time fishing guides and even, you know, all these guys here on this call who now make a living fishing. And, you know, both Wyatt and Justin are, you know, placing in tournaments here this year. Luke has many times in the past. And we're constantly trying to improve. Why wouldn't you want to improve upon something? I know, you know, we had C. Richardson and Tom Rowland and all these guys on the podcast. We've done video tips with Captain Peter Deeks, who's got 8 world records now on his boat. And he's like, man, I'm constantly trying to improve. I'm always trying to up my game. I mean, it's what the best of everyone does. So regardless of where you are, if obviously we do take newbies, we love helping out people who are just getting in, or maybe it's been a decade since you've been fishing. You're just trying to get back in there and want to leapfrog all your friends and have some shortcuts. We'd love to help you. Weekend warriors and even, you know, full-time guides. And so we got all the on the water fishing tips. We have a really amazing community. I mean, I think it's one of the most helpful, certainly the most positive online fishing community ever made. And I love the fact that people are sharing, right? I mean, they're sharing reports and sharing what's working, sharing exactly where they are. I mean, and you know, what what tide they were fishing. I mean, it gets pretty detailed on what people are sharing. It's super, super helpful. And then of course the tackle discounts, which is pretty awesome. And guys like Wyatt, I mean, he's probably one of the cooler stories. I mean, Wyatt, you were in Tennessee, right? And you're like, all right, when I'm going to North Carolina, that's not a quick trip. Like, I want to maximize my time. We have a lot of out-of-staters who are members, meaning out of state, and they're not in Texas or Florida or Virginia or anywhere between, which is really kind of our territory, inshore saltwater fishing. And some of these guys and gals, they'll join just so they can study up on their off time when they're in Illinois or Ohio or wherever they are. And Wyatt did the same thing. So he's going from Tennessee to North Carolina and he wants to kill it, right? I mean, we all want to maximize our time and get more strikes. And then Wyatt did the same thing going from North Carolina to Texas and is killing it there. I mean, your first trip, you caught a slam, right?
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And a 20-inch trout, I remember it was like, man, come down here. And I knew that the trout in Texas were a big thing, but to come down and, it was awesome because I was able to look at the community reports, know what the trends for the area were. I knew what they were dialed in on in terms of bait patterns. I knew the depths they were holding. I was able to have a game plan before I even arrived in the state. And that was really cool to just have all that information there. And, you go and try and pull teeth with somebody at a tackle shop on what's working. It can be really tough. And then there are some areas where they might even lead you astray. So it's good to have a community that wants to see everybody succeed and where you get the right information. It's not focused on some magic lure because there isn't one. It's focused on trends. It's focused on what's working. And the proof is in the pudding. I've done this in 2 different states now. I go travel up and down coastlines to go to different spots. And one of the first things I do is check the community to see what's working in that area, what the trends are, and it pays off time and time again. So my most valuable fishing resource is not, 20 different lures for summer. It's the community, being able to know what's working, when, and how I can form a game plan around that. So it's my favorite tool in my tackle box.
So basically what he's saying, if you listen this far, you don't need more lures. You really need intel. You need trends. I mean, it's trends trump the lures all day long. We talk about the slam shady. We love it. We take baths in full, 1,000 packs of slam shady. We love the slam shady, but end of the day, you could have the biggest bag of slam shadies that you could possibly fit in the back of your pickup truck, and you're not going to catch fish if you're in a dead zone. So our whole goal is putting you in the feeding zone, the 90-10 zone, and then showing you what to use after that. You obviously do need a great lure and rod, reel, the right test line and all that great stuff, but it's all about getting you in that feeding zone. It makes everything else easier. So yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you for sharing that, Wyatt. And if you haven't joined us, it's pretty simple. Go to saltstorm.com at the top. You see a little button to join the Insider Club. And if you're, depending on where you're watching this or listening, you should see a link there. Come join us. We have an unheard of 365-day, 100% money back guarantee. And we went a little step further, at least for right now. We put something a little bit crazy and bold. We actually will double your money back. So that means if you go a whole year in our club and you don't think that you're not catching more fish and like saving a ton of money, which are the 2 big goals, then we'll give you your money back plus double. So, and if you're wondering what the cost is, $97 per year. I mean, that's a joke, especially for just all the money you save on the tackle alone. It pays for itself real quick. I know we have one or 2 members now that are way over $6,000 of tackle they've spent in the store, and 20% off. It's really, really easy to justify. I mean, save well over $1,000. So hope you guys will join us. For those that you have, the 25,000 strong from Texas to Florida to Virginia and everywhere in between, really anywhere there's redfish and speckled trout and flounder and obviously snook in a couple of those states. You will absolutely love it. It will be the most helpful group and club you've ever joined, and you will save time and you will save money, or you don't pay. It's pretty simple. So guys, thank you so much. Team, this was a fun one. I wish Tony could have joined us, but I think he's out trying to get some fishing and insider reports in before the storms, the stormy and windy summer here. But everybody be safe out there, and for you insider members, we'll see you in the community. Peace.
There you go.
See you guys.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. To find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on soul.